Hello everybody, welcome back. My name is Dominic, I'm the host of the Android Factory. For those who have been following the channel, I apologize, it's been a little hectic lately. And for any newcomers, welcome to the channel. Subscribe if you are brand new so you don't miss out. Today's episode, we're just going to cover some Jetpack Compose basics, go back in time and create our first application here. I'm going to talk a little bit about Jetpack Compose, going to talk about how we can go ahead and build this app, how simple it is nowadays to go ahead and get something like this up and running. And as we can see here, as we click the Generate New Color button, we simply have this square up top, just output whatever color that is. And we do see some of the little technical details here. While I know this video may be a softball for veterans, I am going to use this project to actually kickstart the next topic that we're going to cover, which is going to be GitHub Actions and starting to automate some things inside of GitHub. Possibly even deploying to Firebase remotely. So if that's interesting, stick around. We're going to go ahead and cover that in future videos. And if you're a newcomer here, let's just go ahead and dive in to Compose. All right, so I've gone ahead and deleted all the code to make the application run. We're starting from scratch here, basically what it would look like if you have a new project. And this over here on the right is simply just an image that I took of the emulator so that we can go ahead and just build this back. So let's talk about some basics here in Compose. We have something called a column, and then we also have something called a row. And as you would imagine, these are just two different components, two different parents, parent components that you can use to basically arrange children a certain way. Columns will go ahead and arrange it vertically, rows will arrange things horizontally. And although these ideas are simple, they are extremely powerful. So if we take a look at the picture on the right here, we see we have a couple things going on, but we see that they are like vertically stacked, right? There's nothing really moving horizontally here. So we're not going to worry about a row. For this project here, we're simply just going to talk about a column. And we see that we have some element up top here that was reacting as we clicked a button, and then we had another button, right? So we're basically going to have that, color UI, and then we're going to have a button. And as long as we declare things inside of the column as such, as in this order, then they will appear in that order on the screen as well. So first things first, we're just going to start simple here. We're going to create a box. A box is another primitive object here that you can basically use. It's basically like a row or a column if it didn't necessarily have inherent orientation to it. So a box, you can have elements inside of it overlap one another, and you can have what's called alignment to move elements to certain positions within inside the box. But we're just simply going to use the box to get that color square that we see changing when we click the button. So inside of Compose, we will use a concept here called modifiers all over the place. And modifiers are extremely powerful because it's how we actually modify each individual object. So how we can go ahead and change certain attributes about a box, about a column, about a row, about a button, literally every single component you can use a modifier on, and you can go ahead and, modify its attributes, sorry to be using the same name, and with that, you can use these bare bones out-of-the-box tools, box, column, rows, and just change certain attributes about them via modifiers, and you can come up with extremely interesting UIs, and basically, the sky is the limit here. So one popular thing that we're going to go ahead and use here is a modifier called size. We're going to set this to 250 dp. And basically this means that it's basically a shortcut for modifier.height and modifier.width. So we're just going to basically create a box that has 250 dp as the size, a square. And to start things off here, we are going to create, we're going to use the background modifier as well, and we're going to set the color to color.black just for sake of this demo here. And let's just go ahead and rerun things so we can actually see. And as we see here, we have a box 250 dp by 250 dp, a perfect square with the background color black. It is top left aligned, and we can start to see the UI resemble things a tiny bit. But let's cover two things that we see wrong with this. One, it's not horizontally centered, and there's also not this little bit of space in between the top of the phone, the top of the device, and this box that we've drawn here. So there are a handful of ways to make this space possible, but one of them I'm going to show you as a spacer, mainly because a spacer can be just a really, really nice way to move elements around, whether some fixed amount or some like ratio based amount or something along those lines. So we can very easily say modifier.height here. If we want the height, let's go with 64 dp to be basically an invisible view that is of height 64, which will inherently push things down in this column. The other thing you can do here is you can actually use a modifier.width as well if you're doing something inside of a row and you want a little bit of a space this is one way to accomplish it. Another way is actual padding on inside of, the box here, which is applicable, but we're going to get to padding in a little bit. So for now, we're just going to go ahead with this spacer concept. And now rerunning the app here, we see we have a little bit of a gap, right? And specifically a 64 dp gap from the top of the column. And notice that because inside of our column, we have the spacer first and then the box after that, that we simply get the UI that resembles that, right? The space is above the box that we're looking for. Wonderful. So let's go ahead and center this. And if we look really closely, the edges here are not rounded and the edges in the image are rounded. So let's go ahead and take care of both of those now. The rounding bit on our particular box is actually extremely simple to cover. So inside of our background modifier, we have one additional thing available to us called shape. So we set the color to whatever we want, and then our shape here, we're going to set to a rounded corner shape, and we're just going to say 8 dp. And yep, if you're coming from XML, this is literally how simple it is to go ahead and change the corner radius of a particular view. Absolutely insane. And then one other thing that we wanted to do here is we wanted to change around the horizontal alignment. And if we take a look here, I'm going to go ahead and dive into the column code, we can see that one of the attributes here is a horizontal alignment. And this is alignment.horizontal, and it defaults to alignment.start, which is why our view is always left justified, left aligned inside of our column. So we can very easily change that by saying horizontal alignment equals alignment.center horizontally, which is exactly what we want when we take a look at the image over here on the screen. So let's just continue on going here. Let's get this functional first, because I think that's a little more important, and then we can perfect the UI. So the next bit of, or the only bit of functionality is having this button at the bottom of the screen. And when it clicks something, or when that button is clicked, we went ahead and just generated a new random color and smacked that in here, right? At the moment, we're simply just setting the background of that box to be black. We obviously want this to be a little bit more dynamic. So we can go ahead and we can create another little bit of visual representation here of the space, because we are going to use the modifier.height. I don't know, let's call that 32 dp. And then afterwards, we can go ahead and add a button on screen. And now the button here, we basically have one thing that we have to implement, the on click. Pretty straightforward what that would do, right? When the button is clicked, this little lambda here gets invoked, and then inside of this lambda block at the end is actually what our button looks like. So simply here, we can go ahead and put a text element in here, and we will set the text to something simple like generate new color, as we see on the screen over there. And then our to-do here for the button click, we are just going to leave as is. Rerunning things a little bit here, we get exactly this. We get another 32 dp between this item here, this box, and this button. We go ahead and click the button, and obviously nothing is happening, so we just need to wire that up. Now inside of Compose, we have this concept of recomposition, and the Compose framework is smart enough to basically recompose elements of the screen that require certain, or that are hooked up to particular data points, right? So one thing that we can actually care for is we can actually make this color here basically a data point that this box cares for, right? And so instead of color.black, we will go ahead and dynamically create that. But we need to kind of manage this state is really what we're getting into, right? We have a particular default color, our black color, and when we go ahead and click the button, we will then change that color to a different state. Then the box will recompose, because the system understands that, hey, the color has changed. So therefore, this element here that cares about the color needs to recompose itself, and then it will draw itself accordingly. So we can go ahead and create a little bit of a variable here. We're going to call it var current color. And we're going to do a little bit of compose magic here. It's going to be called by remember. And then inside of this remember block, we're going to have the mutable state of, and then this is going to be our default value here, which is going to be the color.black. So let's just go ahead and get this working, and then we will talk about it. So this by remember concept and this mutable state of internally to this by remember block is something that is extremely common inside of Compose. The fact that it's a var and that it's a mutable state of gives us the ability to actually change this variable under the hood. And then the by remember is starting to get a little bit in the weeds here of the Compose framework and how Compose works. But basically, whenever this we don't have a function here, but whenever this composable, if we were to imagine this entire thing here as the composable of the screen, whenever this composable runs again or is told to redraw itself from the framework, the by remember is going to be a backdoor into that process to actually tell the system, redraw yourself, but actually basically remember whatever the state of this value is. Do not change this value. All of these elements down here are going to basically be redrawn as if it was the first time or the 100th time during some kind of a recomposition. So this might be a little bit of a loose example because we don't have a full-on composable here, but we can revisit this concept in a little bit when we go ahead and break some of this stuff out. But basically, just understand the by remember immutable state of is a very common pattern to actually save state inside of your composable, and all of the elements inside of it, or any of the elements inside of it that care for the variable, will recompose accordingly. So instead of setting the color here on the background of this box to just be color.black, we can actually set it to the value of this variable. And that's super powerful, right? Because it's going to start as black, but then anytime we update this color variable, this box here has the background set to it. So the framework is going to say, hey, box, redraw yourself, and there will be a new color, and therefore the color of the box, the background of the box, will change. The last little bit here to do is on click, we need to actually change this current color. So I'm just going to go ahead and jump out of compose land for a tiny bit, and we're just going to say private fun, generate random color. This is going to return a color, setting each individual attribute on that color, to be some random value between 1 and 255. I mean, I guess you could actually do 0, right? Yeah, because 0, 0, 0 is black, 255, 255, 255 is white. So now we have this function here, just a pure Kotlin function here that returns us a color. Super, super nice here. We're just going to say current color equals generate random color, just like that. So when our button is clicked, we're going to go ahead and invoke that function, save it into this state. This state here is used inside of this box here, and so the framework is going to say, hey box, go ahead, update yourself. And as we go ahead and rerun things here, it is defaulting to our black state, which is totally normal. And then as we click this button here, we are generating a new color randomly. I haven't seen any color repeat itself. Eventually they will, but for all intents and purposes, we are creating a new color every single time we have this value. I mean, that's basically it, right? The guts of the actual application, at least what we demoed in the beginning of the video, it's all here. It's working, right? If we look to the right, there's a little bit more UI work that we're going to go ahead and do. If you made it this far in the video, I'd really appreciate a like. Subscribe if you are brand new. Let me know how I'm doing down in the comments below. And as I mentioned here, the second half of the video, we're just going to go ahead and do a little bit more UI work, get it up to speed here with what we see on the right. So as we see here, we have another text attribute RGB, and then we print out the red, green, and blue values here underneath this this box. And we have a little bit of extra layering here, a little bit of a background to actually just kind of, provide some depth to this UI here, right? So one thing that we're going to do to accomplish this UI is we're actually going to go ahead and create a specific composable, and that might help nail down this concept of the current color, the by remember immutable state of, because it might get a little bit easier to kind of understand what's going on. We're going to basically create another composable down here. And a way that we do that, or what a composable is basically a reusable block of UI. Just super powerful. If you think about anything from like recycler views, it would basically be like coming up with a view holder that you can just reuse anywhere you want as long as you supply it the data that you need. So we go ahead and do that by saying @composable, and then we can come up with any function. We're going to call this thing color display, and its input is going to be a color, and it's not going to return anything because it is a composable. But this is it. This is all you have to do to actually annotate or create a composable. You just annotate a function @composable. Now you can reuse this wherever you want. The guts of this composable here is going to be this, right? So we're going to go ahead and cut this thing out. And then we're going to use that little box that we just took, and we're going to go ahead and make a UI that resembles the thing on the right. So what we have here is we have another column, if you think about it, right? Because that colored box and the text underneath it are vertically aligned with, or not aligned, but they're stacked on top of one another vertically. That's exactly what a column does here. So we're going to go ahead and add an additional column, and then inside of the column we're going to paste in our box modifier. The current color will just be set to color, which is passed in. And then again, we are going to, let's just do it without the spacer, see what it looks like first. We're going to create the text value here, or text composable. we're going to say RGB. And then inside here, we're going to have to extract out the different attributes, right? So we're just going to say color.red, color.blue. Perfect, right? And that's going to be, that's what the RGB stands for. I'm sure you guys knew that anyway. This is now a little bit of a reusable piece of information that we can actually, a reusable composable, and we just simply call it as if it's a function, right? So we're just going to go ahead up here, say color display, and then we're going to set our color to equal to the current color. And now we can reuse this composable, this component that we've now built, this custom UI that we've built anywhere inside of our project. All right, flipping over to our emulator here, we get this guy. Okay, so we start to see it come together, and when we click on it, we see something funky here. And it seems like we are actually representing the red, green, and blue values as floats that range from 0 to 1, as opposed to integers that range from 0 to 255. Okay. Shouldn't be that big of a deal here. So let's go ahead and clean this up. In order to do so, we are just going to multiply each one of these values here by 255. We're going to put them in parentheses, and we're going to call toInt on it. All right, and we've simply just done that here. It's not super exciting. It's just some output stuff. So I didn't want to bore you with the details, but if we go ahead and rerun things now, we should see this UI coming together for exactly what you would expect, right? And so now we actually are getting the particular RGB values in a little bit more human readable. And as we see here, we are running into a little of an issue as far as the alignment again, and we don't have a background. So let's go ahead and shape up that alignment one more time. We see there's a little bit of a gap here between the, the bottom of this color and then the top of the RGB text. So we can go ahead and build that out as well. You know the deal here. We can go ahead and do a spacer. We're going to set the modifier of height to, let's just call it 8 dp. And then inside of our column, in order to get things centered, specifically horizontally centered, we're just going to go with our alignment center horizontally. And so now eventually what this view tree or the hierarchy looks like is we do have a column that is the entire screen, right? That then has its alignment set to center horizontally. And then inside of this color display is another column, right? So you could basically just copy this exact thing that's right here and paste it in place of here. And so now we're getting columns inside of columns. And potentially, you could even build it out with rows or rows inside rows, columns inside rows, rows inside columns, etc. Right? You can see how these simple building blocks really just allow you to build whatever the hell you want and do so in such a clean, concise, declarative way. That's what this is called, a declarative UI. You can even add in functional, pieces of logic like if statements or when statements to actually change the UI or add things to the UI on the fly based upon some real-time value that's being calculated. Absolutely perfect, absurd. Android should always have been this way. Anyway, we are now looking pretty good, pretty close, except we don't have that background image or color at least. And this is where we're going to make use of our padding attribute. So let me just do something first as an example to show you what things look like currently, because it's a little bit difficult to tell exactly where that column is. So we're going to go ahead and create the color modifier, and we're just going to set this to color.red. So that it is extremely clear where the column that we're looking at here actually is. And if we take a look now, we can see, oh yeah, there we go, that's perfect. We can see that this column that we've set to have the background of red is all the way at the very top. We can actually see it bleeding past those, rounded edges, right? And then we can see it ending right underneath this text here. And if we compare that to the column or the UI that we see on the right, we see that things are actually pushed away from the edges, right? We see this blue image is pushed down from the top and in from the sides and even up from the bottom, right, on this particular thing, this particular background. And this is where padding can come into play. So as I mentioned earlier, we skipped around padding, but we're going to go ahead and use it now here. So if we set padding on a particular, parent element, we will force its children to basically be, inside of the bounds at which we tell it. So let's just simply go with a simple padding here called padding.start or padding, set the start padding. And we're just going to see what that looks like really quickly, and then we'll clean everything up. So we can see here now that the start padding on this column has now been given 16 dp. So that basically pushes the children 16 dp to the right from the start of the view, or the composable, the column in this case, and then it starts worrying to draw the children. So we can go ahead and leverage this idea of padding here, and instead of start, if we just say all equals 16 dp, we can then go ahead and create something very similar to what we see on the left. On the right, sorry. And that's more or less it. The last little bit that we need to do is just clean up this color here. So I think I used a light gray. And then as we see, here we have just sharp edges in the background of this column. We've done this once before inside of the background and the modifier on the column. We can very easily just set the shape to be the rounded corner shape. Let's go ahead and reformat the code there so it looks clean. And rerunning things here, we end up with a UI that looks dangerously similar to what we created or what we started this video with. Ooh, wow, we almost got one that matched the background there. And as we click around here, we see everything updating, right? We see the color itself updating that box. We see the data points underneath here updating, all that kind of stuff. All of it super simple, super lovely. Very reactive design, and we're really just maintaining that one little bit of state there, the color that we're randomly generating whenever we click this button. So let me know how I did. Let me know in the comments if you made it this far. I'd really appreciate it. Comment down below, real fan, if you made it to the end. Let me know if you learned something new. Let me know if you're interested or what you're interested in. Make future content on it. And as I mentioned here, we are going to look into a little bit of GitHub Actions. So if you are interested in that kind of content here, start to get into a little bit of automation around your code base. Very excited to bring that information to you. Anyway, thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next one.